Hello friends, welcome to Chess World. The Caro-Kann defense is a chess opening characterized by the moves e4, c6. The Caro-Kann is a common defense against the king's pawn opening and is classified as a semi-open game, like the Sicilian defense and French defense. Although it is thought to be more solid and less dynamic than either of those openings. It often leads to good endgames for black, who has the better pawn structure. The opening is named after the English player Horatio Caro and the Austrian player Marcus Kahn, who analyzed it in 1886. Kahn scored an impressive 17-move victory with Caro-Kann defense against German-British chess champion Jacques Wieses at the Fourth German Chess Congress in Hamburg. We also learned the repertoire for black in all the 10 e4, d5, e captures d5, knight f6, c4, protecting the d pawn. Now c6, attacking the white center. Knight c3, protecting the pawn. Now c captures d5, c captures d5, knight captures d5. Bishop b5 check. Knight c6, bishop captures c6 and b captures c6 and protecting the knight on d5. Knight f3, e6, castling, bishop d6, knight d4, bishop captures h2, king h1, bishop c7, g3, bishop b7, protecting the c6 pawn, queen a4, attacking the pawn c6, castling, knight captures c6, knight e4, knight b6. Now knight captures c6 and knight captures a4, knight captures d8, bishop captures e4 check and f3, Bishop d3 attacking the rook, and no two pieces are under attack, and black wins the game. e4, c6, knight c3, d5, knight f3, bishop g4, pinning the knight, h3, bishop captures f3, queen captures f3, e6, d4, d captures e4, knight captures e4, queen captures d4, c3 attacking the queen, queen moves to d5, bishop g5, black moves f5, rook d1 attacking the queen, and queen captures e4, queen captures, recaptures e4, pawn captures e4, rook d8 check, king moves to f7, queen f4, knight f6, queen captures b8, rook captures b8, bishop a3, and bishop captures a7, bishop captures b2, bishop d4, protecting the pawn on c3. Now black has to move. Rook a8 attacking the pawn on a2, bishop c4 protecting the pawn on a2, b5, bishop b3, knight d5, king e2, bishop captures c3 and bishop captures c3, knight c3 check, king e3, knight captures a3, king captures e4, and c6, c5, king e5, c4 attacking the bishop, bishop moves to c2, b4, and black is going to win the game. Now moving on to another game, e4, c6, knight c3, d5 attacking the white center, knight f3, bishop g4 pinning the knight, d4, e6, bishop d3, now knight f6, e captures d5, c captures d5, h3 attacking the bishop. Bishop h5, bishop f4, knight c6, g4, bishop g6, knight e2, bishop d6, attacking the bishop, c3, queen c7, battery against the bishop. Now bishop captures d6 and queen captures d6. Now bishop captures g6, h captures g6, opening the file for h, rook, knight g3 and queen f4, queen e2 and triple O for black, long castling, queen e3 and queen moves to c7, long castling for white, and king b8, knight e5, knight captures e5, d captures e5, knight d7, here white made mistake, rook moves to e2, e1 and d4, attacking the queen, queen f4 and d captures c3, opening the king position, and b3, knight c5. Now here family fork is coming for white and black is winning. In another game between two grandmasters, e4, c6, knight c3, d5, knight f3, bishop g4, winning the knight, h3, bishop captures f3 and queen captures f3, e6, d3 and knight f6, bishop d2, knight d7, long castling, d4, knight e2, queen b6, g4, h6, queen g3, long castling for black, and f4, knight c5, queen e1, queen d5, e5, attacking the knight, knight d5, coming onto queen side, b3, knight a4, king b1, and bishop c5, king a1, knight c3, bishop captures c3 and pawn captures c3, d4, attacking the bishop, and queen a5, rook h2, knight e3, rook c1 protecting the c2 pawn, 4 c6, knight c3, d5, knight f3, bishop g4 pinning the knight, h3 attacking the bishop, bishop captures f3 and queen captures f3, e6, b3, knight f6, bishop d2, knight d7, long castling for white, and d4 attacking the knight, knight e2 and queen d6, coming onto queenside and attacking the king, g4 and h6, queen g3, long castling for black, f4, knight c5, queen e1, queen b5, e5 attacking the knight, knight d5 coming towards the queen side of the white, b3, knight a4, king b1 and bishop c5, king a1, knight c3, bishop captures c3 and d captures c3, d4 attacking the bishop and queen a5 and rook h2, knight e3, rook c1 protecting the c2 pawn, queen a3 and check is coming and black is winning the game. In another game, e4, c6, knight c3 and d5, knight f3, bishop g4, h3, bishop captures f3 and queen captures f3, knight f6, d3, e6, bishop d2, queen b6, g3, bishop b4, rook b1, d4 attacking the knight, knight e2, bishop captures d2, king captures e2, d2, queen a5 check, c3, queen captures a2, bishop g2 and connecting the both the rooks. Now d captures c3, knight captures c3, queen b3, rook c1, knight d7, d4, queen b4, queen d3, and knight c5. If white blindly captures this knight on c5, then rook will comes into capturing the queen. And queen moves to e3, and knight b3, forking the king and rook, and black is winning the game. Let's move on to another game. e4, c6, knight c3 protecting the pawn, d5, knight f3, bishop g4, h3, bishop captures f3, queen captures f3, knight f6, d3, and e6, bishop d2, d4, attacking the knight, knight e2, c5, g4, knight c6, g5, attacking the knight, knight d7, h4, c4, bishop g2, queen b6, b3, c captures d3 and c captures d3, bishop b4, rook d1 protecting the bishop, queen a5, bishop captures b4, queen captures b4, king f1, queen a5, bishop h3, queen captures a2, b4, queen c2 attacking the rook, knight f4, queen is protecting the rook, knight e5 attacking the queen, queen e2, queen captures e2, check, knight captures e2, knight captures b4, knight captures d4, and long castling for black, and now rook is attacking the center of the white, and black is winning. e4, c6, d4, d5, f3, and d captures e4, f captures e4, e5, challenging the white center, knight f3, e captures d4, bishop c4, knight f6, knight g5, bishop g4, bishop captures f7 check, king moves to e7, queen d2, h6, queen b4 check, queen d6, queen captures b7 check, knight d7, queen captures a8, h captures g5, opening the rook 5, and bishop c4, rook captures h2, rook captures h2, queen g3 check, king f1, knight captures e4, bishop captures g5 check, king d6, bishop h4, attacking the queen, queen captures h2, bishop f2, queen f4, king g1, queen captures f2 check, king h2, bishop f3, threatening mate, checkmate, bishop f1, queen captures f1, and g captures f3, queen f2 check, king h3, and queen g3 checkmate. In another game between two grandmasters, e4, c6, d4, d5, e5, bishop f5, bishop d3, and bishop captures d3 and queen captures d3, e6, knight e2, queen a5 check, knight d2, queen a6 and queen e3, h5, f4, knight h6, knight b3, knight b7, bishop d2, b6, g3, c5, challenging the white center, c3, c captures d4, rook c8, and h3, rook c2, king d1, knight f5, queen is under attack, queen moves to f3, rook captures b2, knight c1 protecting the a2 square, queen c4, bishop c3 and rook g2. Now if queen captures rook, then fork is coming, knight e3 and black is winning. Let's move on to another game. e4, c6, d4, d5, e5, c5, c4, knight c6, d captures c5, d4, bishop f4, e6, knight f3, bishop c5, a3, a5, knight d2, h6, knight e4, b6, knight d2, knight e7, knight captures c5, b captures c5, knight e4 attacking the c5 pawn, black castles, bishop g3, knight g6, f4, queen b6, bishop d3, knight e7, queen d2, knight f5, bishop f2, bishop b7, castling, bishop c6, rook e1, rook d8, g4 and knight e3, bishop captures c3 and queen captures e3, rook d4, rook e2, rook d8, rook d1, rook captures e4 and white cannot capture with bishop, and he will lose the rook and will get checked, and black is winning. e4, c6, knight c3 protecting the pawn, d5 challenging the white center, queen f3, d captures e4, knight captures e4, knight f6, knight captures f6 and b captures f6, bishop c4, knight d7, queen h5 and knight e5, bishop b3, queen a5 check, no, still queen moves to h4, rook g8, f4, rook captures g2, f captures e5 and queen captures e5 check, king moves to f1, rook g4 attacking the queen on h4, queen f2, rook f4 pinning the queen, knight f3, bishop h3 check. Black is winning the game. And in another game between two grandmasters, e4, c6, d4, d5, f3, d captures e4, f captures e4, e5, knight f3, e captures d4, bishop c4, bishop e7, knight e5 and queen a5 check and winning the knight on e5. Castling, knight f6, bishop f4 attacking the queen, queen captures e4, queen comes to c5 attacking the bishop and bishop moves to d3, knight d7, knight d2, castling, e5, knight e4, knight captures e5, b4 attacking the queen, queen d5, bishop captures e5, queen captures e5, rook e1, queen c7, knight e4, knight captures e4 and rook captures e4, f5 attacking the rook, rook captures d4 and bishop f6 attacking both the rooks in the same diagonal. Black is winning the game. d4, d5, knight f3, c5, e3, knight c6 and c4, c captures d4, e captures d4, knight f6, bishop g4, bishop e3, e6, bishop e2 and d captures c4 and bishop captures c4, bishop d6, castling, and rook c8, bishop e2 and castling, queen a4, bishop b8, rook d1, queen b6, g3, knight d5, king g2, knight e7, knight e4, queen d8, knight c5, knight captures e3, f captures e3, knight f5, rook d3 protecting the e3 pawn, bishop captures f3, king captures f3, queen g5, black is winning. In another game between two grandmasters, e4, d5, e captures d5, c6, d4, c captures d5, bishop d3, knight c6, bishop e3, knight f6, knight f3, and bishop g4, h3, bishop captures f3 and queen captures f3, queen b6, attacking the b2 pawn, castling, queen captures b2, knight d2, knight captures d4, queen f4, knight e6 and queen a4, check, knight d7, rook b1, queen c3, rook captures b7, knight c7, bishop d4, attacking the queen, and queen captures d2. Rook captures c7 and rook d8. Queen captures d7 and rook captures d7. Rook c8 check. Rook d8 and bishop b5 checkmate. In another game, let us see what happened. e4, c6, d4, d5, challenging the white center. E captures d5, c captures d5, bishop d3, knight f6, h3, knight c6, knight f3, e6, castling, bishop d6, c3, queen c7 and rook e1, bishop d7, queen e2 and bishop f4, knight d2, g6, g3, bishop h6, g4 and bishop again comes to f4, knight e5, h5, knight f3, bishop captures c1, rook captures c1 and h captures g4, h captures g4, long castling for black, king g2 running towards the center and knight captures g4, knight captures g4, queen f4 and knight h2 protecting the g4 knight, e5, rook h1, e4 attacking the bishop, bishop b5, rook h4, f3, rook h8, doubling the rooks. E4, c6, d4, d5, e captures d5, c captures d5, c4, knight f6, knight c3, knight c6, knight f3, bishop g4, pinning the knight, bishop e3, e6, and c5. Bishop captures f3, queen captures f3, bishop e7, bishop b5, castling, and castling for white also, e5, d captures c5, knight captures c5, queen f5, knight g4, bishop d4, and bishop captures c5, bishop captures c5, queen c7, and attacking the both bishop on h2 square, rook d1, and queen captures h2 check, king f1, rook e8, and bishop captures e8, rook captures e8, and bishop e3, rook captures e3, and queen c8 check, rook e8, queen captures e8, and knight captures e8, and black is going to win the game. If white is not having any other ways to protect the bishop or protecting the queen, no, there is no other alternative. If knight is protecting the e2 square, also bad for white. Move on to another game. e4, c6, d4, d5, e captures d5, c captures d5, and c4, knight f6, knight c3, g6, and c5, bishop g7, castling, bishop g2, and b6, knight e2, d captures c5, d captures c5, knight a6, knight captures d5, knight captures d5, bishop captures d5, and rook b8, castling, and bishop h3, taking the rook, rook moves to e1, and e6, attacking the bishop, and bishop f3, knight captures c5, knight f4 and bishop f5, bishop e3 and queen a5, queen d6 and knight b7 attacking the queen, queen d2 and queen captures d2 and bishop captures d2, bishop captures d2 and rook b1, bishop captures b1 and rook captures b1, knight c5 and bishop e3 attacking the knight and bishop a3 protecting the knight and at the same time attacking the rook on b1, and black is winning the game. e4 c6 d4 d5, knight c3 and d captures e4, knight captures e4, knight f6, knight g3, h5, bishop g5 and h4, bishop captures f6 and h captures g3, bishop e5 and rook captures h2, rook captures h2 and queen a5. All of a sudden black is and queen captures e5 and d captures e5, g captures h2 and black is making the queen and winning the game. In another game, e4 c6 d4 d5, knight c3, d captures e4 and knight captures e4, knight f6 and queen d3 protecting the knight and e6, knight f3 and bishop e7, knight e5, knight d7, knight captures f7 and king captures f7, knight g5, check, king g8, knight e6 attacking the queen and queen e8, knight c7 forking the queen and rook and bishop b4. Now black is winning the game. If king moves to d1, queen e1, checkmate. Moving on to another game, e4 c6 d4 and d5 attacking the white center, knight c3, b5 and a3, D captures E4, knight captures E4, knight F6, knight captures F6 and E captures F6, C4 and bishop D6, queen, bishop E3 and castling, C5, bishop C7 and D5 and C captures D5 and queen D2, D4, bishop captures D4 and knight C6 attacking the bishop and knight F3 protecting the bishop and queen B5, bishop moves to E3 and queen B3. Now rook will come to D8 and black is going to win the game. Black is having clear chances of moving the a pawn and coming onto bishop check, bishop pinning the queen and winning the game. Let's move on to another game. E4, C6, D4, D5 and knight D2, D captures E4, knight captures C4, knight F6, knight captures F6 and E captures F6, bishop D2, bishop E2, bishop D6 and bishop comes to F3 castling, knight E2 and rook E8 castling, queen C7 attacking the H2 square and H3, knight D7, C4, knight F8 and knight C3, knight G6, C5 and bishop F8, B4, bishop E6 and bishop E3, rook C8, rook D8, queen A4, knight H4 and bishop E2, bishop captures H3 and opening the king's position of white. Knight is already at H4 and black is winning the game. E4, C6, D4, D5, knights C3 and D captures E4 and F3, knight F6, bishop c4, bishop f5 and g4. White is playing very aggressively. Bishop g6, g5, knight d5, knight captures e4 and e6, knight e2, bishop e7, rook g1, knight d7, bishop d2, e5, bishop captures d5 and c captures d5, knight c3 and e captures d4, knight captures d5, knight e5, knight captures e7, queen captures e7, rook g3, rook c8, now rook c1, d3, c captures d3, knight captures d3 and king f1, knight captures c1 and bishop captures c1, and black is winning. e4, c6, d4, d5, knight c3, d captures c4, knight captures c4 and knight f6, knight captures f6, e captures f6 and bishop c4, queen e7 and knight e2, queen b4, winning the bishop on c4. e4, c6, d4, d5, knight c3, knight captures e4, knight f6, knight captures f6 and g captures f6, bishop f4, queen b6, rook b1, bishop e6, b3, bishop f5 and bishop c4, knight a6, a4, long castling, knight e2, c5, bishop captures a6 and queen captures a6, bishop e3 and c captures d4, knight captures d4 and e5. Black is winning the knight and winning the game. Let's move on to another game. d4, d5, e4, d captures e4, knight c3, c6, knight captures e4, knight f6, knight captures f6, g captures f6, and bishop f4, queen b6, bishop c4, queen b4 and winning the bishop. In another game between two grandmasters, e4, c6, d4, d5, knight c3 and d captures e4, knight captures e4, knight f6, knight captures f6, g captures f6, bishop c4, bishop f5, knight e2, knight d7, knight g3, bishop g6, castling, and e6, h4, f5, h5, and queen h4, queen f3, bishop d6, and h captures g6 and h captures g6, rook e1, bishop captures g3, and black is winning the game. Checkmate is coming and he cannot capture with queen or with the pawn. c6, d4, d5, knight c3, d captures c4, knight captures c4, knight d7, knight f3, knight f6, knight g3 and queen c7, bishop d3, e6, castling, bishop d6, rook e1, castling, queen e2, b6, knight e5, c5, knight captures d7, bishop captures d7, bishop g5, knight e8, queen e4, and g6, queen captures a8, and f6, queen comes back to e4, and f captures g5, and bishop c4, knight g7, and d5, e5, and queen e2, knight f5, knight e4, and knight d4, attacking the knight, queen, and queen d2, b5, knight captures d6, queen captures d6, and bishop d3, queen captures d5, and bishop e4, knight f3 check, and g captures f3, and queen captures d2, and black is winning the game. But rook, white moves some and rook d1, and queen a5, and d4, and queen c7, protecting the bishop on d7. And moving on to another game, e4, c6, d4, d5, knight c3, d captures e4, knight captures e4, knight d7, knight f3, knight f6, knight captures f6, knight captures f6, knight e5, bishop f5, bishop c4, e6, g4, white is playing aggressively, and bishop e4, and f3, bishop d5, bishop d3, and bishop d5, d6, and c4, bishop captures e5, d captures c5, knight captures g4, and bishop f4, g5, c captures d5, and g captures f4, f captures g4, and queen captures d5, castling, and black long castle, and rook f3, rook g8, and rook h3, h5, rook captures h5, and queen captures d3, and black is winning the game. In another game between two grandmasters, e4, c6, d4, d5, knight d2, D captures c4, knight captures e4, knight d7, knight f3, knight f6, knight captures f6 and knight captures f6, knight e5, bishop e6 and c4, g6, bishop e2 and bishop g7, castling. Black also castles. Bishop e3, queen c7, h3, rook d8, knight f3, b5, b3, b captures c4, b captures c4 and c5, d5, bishop f5, knight h4, bishop d7, queen c2, rook b8, rook b1 and rook b6, bishop d2, rook a6, bishop d3, e6, d captures e6 and bishop a4, attacking the queen, rook b3 and bishop captures b3, a captures b3 and rook captures e6, bishop e3, queen e7, now is black is having clear chances of winning the game. In another game played between two grandmasters, e4, c6, d4, d5, knight d2, d captures e4, knight captures e4, knight d7, bishop c4, knight f6, knight captures, knight g5, e6, queen e2, knight b6 and bishop b3, h6 and knight f3, c5, d captures c5, knight d7 and b4, b6 and knight h3, b captures c5, b5, bishop d6 and castling, queen c7, king h1, bishop b7, c4, g5, knight g1, rook g8, bishop b2, g4, knight b2, Bishop captures h2, and knight e4, knight h5, queen c2, and f5, knight c3, and queen d8, bishop captures f5, and black is clear winning chances. Moving on to another game, e4, c6, d4, d5, knight d2, d captures c4, knight captures c4, knight d7, knight g5, knight f6, bishop d3, e6, knight f3, bishop d6, queen e2, h6, and knight e4, knight captures e4, queen captures e4, knight f6, attacking the queen, and queen moves back to e2, and b6, castling, and bishop b7, bishop b2, castling, rook d1, queen c7, h3, rook d8, rook e1, rook c8, knight e5, c5, d captures c5, bishop captures c5, bishop f4, rook d4, bishop g3, knight e4, bishop captures c4, and rook captures e4, queen d2, rook captures e5, moving on to another game, e4, c6, d4, d5, knight d2, d captures e4, knight captures e4, knight d7, bishop c4, knight f6, knight g5, e6, knight e2, bishop e7, castling, knight d5, bishop captures d5, bishop captures g5 and bishop captures g5, queen captures g5 and bishop b3, e4, c6, d4, d5, knight c3, d captures c4, knight captures c4, bishop f5, knight g3, bishop g6, knight f3, knight d7, bishop d3 and castle, bishop d6, knight e5, bishop captures e5, knight e4, bishop captures e4 and bishop captures e4, knight f6, bishop moves back to d3 and queen c7, h3, h6, knight d2, c5, knight e4, knight captures e4, bishop captures e4, long castling, and bishop e3, knight f6, queen f3 and c d4 and bishop d4, bishop h2, check, and black is winning the piece. In another game, e4, c6, d4, d5, knight c3, d captures c4, knight captures c4, bishop f5, knight g3, bishop g6 and c3, e6, bishop d3 and knight d7, knight f3, queen c7, bishop e3, knight f6, castling, bishop d6, knight g5, a6, rook e1, rook d8, queen e2, bishop captures d3, queen captures d3, castling, rook d1, rook e8, knight e4, knight captures c4, queen captures c4, f5, attacking the queen, queen f3, f4, black is winning the game. In another game, e4, c6, d4, d5, knight c3, d captures c4, knight captures c4, bishop f5, and knight g3, bishop g6, f4, e6, knight f3, bishop d6, knight e5, knight e7, knight captures g6, knight captures g6, queen f3, queen h4, bishop d3, knight captures f4, castling, g5, knight e4, knight e2, check, bishop captures e2, bishop captures h2, check, king h1, bishop g3, check, king g1, queen h2, mate. In another game between two grandmasters, let us see what happened. e4, c6, d4, d5, knight c3, d captures e4, knight captures e4, bishop f5, knight g3, bishop g6, bishop c4, e6, knight e2, queen h4, bishop f4, knight f6, queen d2 and h6, castling, knight d7, bishop b3, bishop e7, a4, a5, bishop c7, b6, knight f4, bishop h7, knight h5, knight captures h5, and knight captures, and black is going to get another piece. In another game, e4, c6, d4, d5, knight c3, d captures e4, knight captures e4, bishop f5, knight g3, bishop g6, knight e2, e6, knight f4, bishop d6, bishop c4, knight f6, knight h5, knight captures h5, knight captures h5, bishop and queen captures h5, queen b3, b5, bishop captures e6, bishop d3, queen b3, b5, bishop e6, bishop d3, bishop e3, and queen e2 mate. D e4, c6, d4, d5, knight c3, d captures e4, knight captures e4, bishop f5, knight g3, bishop g6, h4, h6, knight f3, knight d7, h5, bishop h7, bishop d3, bishop captures d3, queen captures d3, e6, bishop d2, knight f6, long castling, bishop e7, queen e2, c5, d captures c5, queen c7, knight e4, knight captures e4, queen captures e4, knight c5, queen e5, and knight d3, forking the king and queen and winning the game. In another game, e4, c6, d4, d5, knight c3, d captures c4, knight captures c4, bishop f5, knight g3, bishop g6, h4, h6, knight f3, knight d7, h5, bishop h7, bishop d3, bishop captures d3, queen captures d3, e6, bishop f4, queen a5, check, bishop d2, bishop b4, c3, bishop e7, c4, queen c7, long castling, and knight f6, king b1, black castles, bishop c3, b5, knight e5, rook d8, f4, Knight captures e5, f captures e5, b captures c4, queen d2, knight d5, bishop a5, knight b6, queen f4, rook d5, knight e4, rook captures a5, and black is